Welcome to the Yoga to Entrepreneur, the podcast for yoga teachers who want to build a thriving business. If you're a yoga teacher looking to turn your passion into a profitable career, you've come to the right place. Each week, I'll bring you expert tips from myself as well as from some incredible guest speakers who share their strategies for growing a yoga business. From marketing and branding to growth strategy and client retention, I'll cover all the essential elements of building a successful yoga business. Get ready to take your yoga business to the next level with Yogi to Entrepreneur. Hello, and welcome to the Yoga to Entrepreneur podcast. Today, it's all about messaging and visibility. So I've recently taken a training by Lisa Johnson, all about visibility, which really helped me, and I think it can actually help a lot of you as well. So I thought I will record a podcast all about this. So one of the, I guess, key takeaways from her training was to be visible everywhere and to be consistent. Now, for a lot of you, this probably will be like, oh no, I need to be visible everywhere. I'm already doing so much, etc., etc., etc. It does Being visible everywhere doesn't necessarily mean you need to be constantly everywhere. There are ways around that, and I will go into that as well. So don't, if you have like half a heart attack right now, take a couple of deep breaths. It's fine. It's not as bad as it potentially sounds to you. The same with consistent. Again, as um, I say all the time, consistency doesn't mean you have to post 1 or 2 times a day. Consistent just means decide on how many times you want to post. So let's say, for example, you decide to post 3 times a week. Just stick to that. That's your consistency, and that's absolutely fine. So again, don't just a lot of people when they hear consistent or being consistent, they think it needs to be 1 or 2 times a day. It really doesn't. Just work out what works for you. We covered that also in the podcast with Chloe Blades, where it was all about social media. So if you haven't yet, just listen to that one as well. It's really good. But so going back to the visibility and messaging, so generally people buy from people they like, and this is why your messaging is like really important. Within your messaging, really focus on delivering a meaningful message. So when you hear like messaging, etc., you potentially think, what is it? How do I get it right? So your messaging essentially is just the message that you bring across within anything that you create, may that be blog posts, social media posts, podcasts, anything at all. So how to get your messaging right? So Lisa Johnson has got a system which is called your messaging pyramid. So which is made up of your primary messaging. So that is all about what you do, who you do it for. That's like it's like the bottom layer essentially of your pyramid is your primary messaging. Then you go one layer up, which is then your secondary messaging. So that's your story, what is important to you, and what makes you different to other yoga teachers, your personal brand. That is all part of your secondary messaging. So, I mean, there are so many yoga teachers around out there. There might be, if you're in London, for example, there are going to be a lot around. So you really need to work out what makes you different. And we're all different. So just sit down and just really work out what makes you you, essentially, because that will help you with anything that you create. And then you've got the top layer is your tertiary messaging. So which is things about you as a person. So that kind of messaging is so that I can see that you're not just a brand, that you are actually a person, and it's like relatable stories. Generally, stories sell. I come to that in a little bit as well. So stories are generally really good just to bring your point across to, um, sell, because at the end of the day, you are building your yoga business. So, just stories generally are really good. So within your messaging pyramid, you obviously have the primary, which is going to be the majority of your messaging. Then you got your secondary, so you do a little bit less, and your tertiary messaging is the least amount of sort of posts that you do about that. The second part of how to get your messaging right is all around establishing your content pillars or brand pillars. So these are themes or topics that you want to be known for. So you may have heard about it. You may have not heard about content pillars or brand pillars. So within your content pillars, so you have your main content pillars or brand pillars. Some may have three, four, five. It really depends on what is right for your business. So, but within your main content pillars, you can also have sub pillars. So that's actually really good. So, for example, if your main pillars that you have could be something like meditation, yoga, and family, because that is it for you, which is fine. And then within your yoga pillar, for example, you can then have different styles of yoga, such as vinyasa or yin, depending obviously what you do. Within your meditation, you can do like yoga nidras, for example, or like just general meditation, whatever really works for you. So you will have to, again, just take some time and really sit down and work out what your content pillars or brand pillars are, if you haven't done that already. I know a lot of people tend to almost jump over that and just almost ignore it. And then the last part to get your messaging right is to break it all down into an actionable plan. So what I just said, so just block out some time just to really work on your messaging and your content pillars. Because then you have the basis of all of your content that you create, which will make it a lot easier for you in the long run. So block out some time, maybe a couple of hours, maybe half a day, whatever it is that, however long it may take you. So then when it actually comes to getting your message out there and across, people generally, as much as we want to believe the opposite, but people don't tend to read a lot of our posts. Um, so, and it takes a while for people to actually take in what you've written. So in this case, repetition is really important. I wouldn't say just copy and paste your old posts. I mean, you can. Maybe not if you've just posted it last week, but maybe write it in a different way. Maybe when you sit down to create your content for the week, for the month, whatever, have a topic and then write it in like 3, 4, 5 different ways. So you have the same story essentially, or the same message within a post, but explained differently. Because some people will connect with one thing and then others with another. It's also what you can also do is like think about what stories you can post in order you bring your point or your message across. So as I said in the beginning, like messaging really sells and messaging really connects with people. And it really, people need this connection these days. They need to be able to trust you. And the only way for us to do that really is to tell our story, different parts of our stories, etc. So let's go on to the actual visibility then, um, which is where it comes in for you to be visible everywhere and sort of be consistent. So with the visibility layers, by Lisa Johnson, so layer one is your social. So that can be your normal social channels like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever it is for you. Um, I'd say just focus on one, potentially two, at a max, and really like focus on that on one platform. Really like use it completely. We touched upon that in the social media podcast as well. Um, and then just really just be visible on there. Um, be consistent. Again, as I said in the beginning, if that means 3 times a week, that's fine. Just stick to your 3 times a week. Just be consistent on there so that your followers can almost expect you to, show up. They know you're going to be posting, 3 times a week, and that's absolutely fine. So layer two is your email list. So if you have not got an email list yet, you may want to think about actually creating one and getting some freebies out there. I'll be recording a podcast in the near future all about email lists, etc. So, but to be able to grow your um, yoga business, you will have to grow your email list. Um, so again, because people will trust you more if they sort of listen, if they hear from you. Um, I was recently told, and I'm not sure how correct that is, but it takes about 80 something touch point before people buy from you. So, which is why the visibility layers really come in. And it really helps you to build that trust with your followers. So with your email, write them a weekly email with a bit about yourself, some business learning at the end. Um, it doesn't need to be anything like super complicated. It could be something that happened to you that week. Um, maybe something funny that happened in your one of your yoga classes. Again, it helps people relate to you and actually see you as a person rather than a brand. Um, and then when it comes to the actual email itself, again, it doesn't need to be super complicated. So one of my clients I'm currently working with was actually holding herself back because in her head, she needed to create this almost like a huge template for for her emails, etc. Um, but you don't need that. Write a simple text newsletter. It works perfectly for so many people that so with a lot of newsletters that I get are simple text newsletters. There is no there's not much fancy things in it at all. To be fair, when I was teaching a few years ago, I actually had all of the templates set up, etc. But I think sometimes with the template as well, if there are too many links in it, they actually go into a spam folder. So it's just something to think about if you have a template. There's nothing wrong with the template, but just don't let it hold you back. Also, I mean, it is for text newsletters as well. Just make sure that there are not too many links in it so that people would actually get it rather than it going into their spam. So we've covered layers one, which is social media or social, layer two, which is email, and then layer three. So this is just an additional layer, something that you're good at, and something that your ideal customer wants. Um, so Lisa actually suggests having 2 to 3 additional layers. Now, which then would mean you have about 4 to 5 different layers altogether so that you are essentially, that means you're everywhere. You're not everywhere, but you're everywhere. So people see you in different places. However, if that feels like really overwhelming to you and you're just starting, with layer one and two, you're just sort of starting that off. With your layer three, just start with one. If you're having like this overwhelming feeling and like almost like anxiety, just start with one. So you've got the simple three layers that you're working every week. Some of them maybe every day. Some suggestions for the third layer might be a podcast, a book. You can write an ebook quite easily. You can put it onto your website or, for example, publish it on Amazon, like the Kindle. I can't remember what it's called. So you don't actually need a publisher these days anymore. If you don't want to host your own podcast, you can be a guest on a podcast. I actually did that when I was teaching quite a lot. I used to go on a bunch of podcasts because it just gives you more exposure. It gives you more eyes on you, your business. And you just never know who also listens to it and who may be in need of your yoga classes, maybe one-to-one or your group yoga classes, whatever you may have on offer. You can be a guest expert on TV. Potentially is slightly harder to get into, but that is one of the layers. You can focus on PR, so magazines, newspapers, etc. Just make sure that you've got like your headshots and everything's ready before you even get to that. There is a really good book that I just started reading, which I just don't actually know the name of it, which is all about PR. I'm actually just looking it up. Oh yeah, it's The Power of PR by Nicola uh, Rowley. Is that it? I'm just literally currently looking at it or looking it up. Yeah, but The Power of PR. So that is, as I said, I'm just reading it. So there's some really good tips in already. Another thing that you could do is teach in memberships and masterminds. So I, again, used to quite like teaching in memberships. I've never actually taught on a mastermind, but that is a nice little something extra that can be offered, which was great. In memberships, it was either I did like a live class in their Facebook group, or I pre-recorded a couple of videos that they could then add to their membership platform, where I was then featured. So again, it's a really good way to get more eyes on you as well. You can host a yoga summit, for example. I've seen a few around of those, and you can speak or teach on stages, or for example, yoga festivals, etc., etc., etc. Depending on where you are in the world, there potentially, there are not that many potentially, but um, you know, if you it helps you with your credibility as well if you are teaching on bigger stages. If you can, for example, say that you've taught at um, like the London Yoga Festival, for example, which is actually the Yoga Festival. But these are just some ideas of the layer three or the third layers things that you could do. Again, just start if this all feels like really overwhelming, just maybe start with one. Um, you know, your blog post, for example, as well. It depends really what you want to do. So if you like to talk, maybe a podcast or be a guest on a podcast might be nice. If you like to write, you can do, books. It's completely up to you, whatever works. and also what your clients want to see from you. Um, then another thing that I heard the other day, which really is really good and it really made me think, is that visibility and value go together. So if you appear more visible, you appear more valuable. And that is part of the psychology and you know, or it's in our heads and stuff. So again, so with the visibility layers, you will be visible everywhere. And I'm putting this in quotation marks because you're obviously not everywhere. Um, but you are everywhere. You're in so many different places. But again, with being consistent. So for example, let's say you post three posts on social a week. You have your weekly email, and then you have, let's say, a weekly podcast, just to keep it fairly simple. So what you then can do from your podcast, you can then create content for your email list. You can create content for your social. So you don't have to create from new all the time. So see, because we all have content one way or another. You might even have yoga classes recorded, for example. Um, you could either take completely repurpose it and potentially make a reel, or if depending on what social you are, or post that video on your social. You can also, for example, take from the video, take a transcript and then take snippets and make an educational post out of it. You can put part of it in your email. Just because you have to be consistent and be everywhere, it doesn't mean that you have to create content completely from scratch or new every time. It's really all about repurposing. That's the best that you can do. See what you've got, see how you can repurpose that. So, you can, out of the podcast, you can then create a blog post, create, even more social posts, etc., etc. Maybe sit down and see what you've got, what content you've got, and see how you can creatively as well repurpose that content. Um, you know, all of these things that I've just mentioned, apart from potentially the stages part, unless someone records it for you, you can actually take whatever on layer three, what part of the podcast, book, TV, PR, whatever you do in memberships, you can take that content and repurpose it. So maybe sit down for maybe just even 10, 15 minutes and really brainstorm what you can do with that, with the content that you've got, what other things you can do with that. Because that will then really help you be consistent and then be visible everywhere. Okay, that was a lot for today. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, just let me know. All of my contact details are in the show notes as well. And until next time, thank you. Bye. That's it for today's episode of Yogi to Entrepreneur. I hope you found this discussion helpful in growing your yoga business. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me reach more yoga teachers like you who want to build a thriving business. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on Yogi to Entrepreneur.